Talk geeky to me with Wabtec. Just made that up. The hazards or non-hazards of 2.4 gigahertz cell phone exposure, and or if you agree that in fact that is the correct frequency emitted by or received from towers or phones themselves. Several friends have had health issues possibly related to exposure. Keyword being possibly. Thanks. Thank you very much, unnamed individual who I think I let this post as a comment. I don't remember. I hope I did. Thank you very much, YouTube, for making stuff disappear. I'll just go on. Anyway. Hazards or not. Okay, here we go. I'm going to discuss something pretty simple. We're going to talk about the main claim about radio frequency sensitivity. The main claims. One, that the human body can react because of something. Doesn't matter what it is. Just, is it possible for a person's body to react to radio signals, not damaging anything, just have a response to them? Fact is, human beings are sensitive to all sorts of things, but it's below our usual ability to detect. Independent studies have shown that we do not have the ability to, on purpose, deliberately detect or produce signals. Except if you want to do extremely bizarre forms of biofeedback, you can technically get better than like a 1 in 100 shot of actually doing something purposefully detectable, meaning making your nervous system do something. But as for receiving signal, I'm sorry, but our brains and our nervous systems and our biology are very dense for various reasons, but I'll get to that in a minute. So, as for electromagnetic sensitivity being neurological, being affecting you, etc., the most likely answer is no. Now we're going to do the 2.4 gigahertz. Cell phones aren't actually restricted to a particular frequency range. I mean, they are, but a cell phone can malfunction, towers can malfunction. Towers can also have other radio signal sources and receiving sources. They can work all sorts of frequencies. That and the fact that cell phones receive signals that aren't in that range either, because they pick up GPS, and some do LoRaN, and some do other things. There are even cell phones that pick up AM/FM radio or other stuff. And I won't even bring up how many different frequency groupings Wi-Fi uses. You'd have to look up the bandwidth, and you'd have to test for it, meaning you'd have to use a spectrum analyzer to truly confirm it. I cannot confirm or deny any particular cell phone tower or phone. But, yeah, they are on that range, and that's the way they work, and it's a generalized thing. Now let's talk about wattages. Okay. Question to ask. Can a radio signal, it doesn't matter what the frequency, if it's made intense enough, cause damage to a human? This is just period. We're talking just, can it be detected at all, and is there long-term exposure effects? From the electromagnetic radiation, maybe not, or maybe, depending on the conditions. You could be under a high-tension power line that's running DC, meaning no oscillation of any kind, but it can produce electrostatic charges that does affect things in the area, because it's simply electrostatic charges. It can have some effect. It can produce ozone if there's high voltages involved. That can have an effect. But as for radio cell towers or your cell phone causing, and this is the big one, cancer, the answer is a resounding, deafening no. The radio signals do not produce what we would have to now call photons. Radio signals that are high enough frequency occur in such a way that they produce a packet of energy that pushes and then pulls within a very short distance. It's always moving at the speed of light, or presumed that speed, within air or whatever material. In space it's faster. And that means the wavelength is important. Ionizing radiation can be pieces of matter coming off of an atom that's split, radio signals, ultraviolet light, that's photons, we call it photons, photoelectrons. They're packets of energy that resemble light. And radio signals at higher and higher frequency behave more like packets of light energy and are acting, if you want to look up the definition for quantum or quanta, they tend to behave like packets of energy that are independent, that don't seem to spread out as much, depending on how you look at it, depending on which way you want to do the calculations and work. But the frequency at 2.4 gigahertz is nowhere near high enough, because you have to have, ultraviolet light is higher frequency than you can see, which means you'd have to have a signal that is eventually visible, and then high frequency. Infrared is below frequency that you can see, but it's basically heat. 2.4 gigahertz is not anywhere near high enough to be considered in the range of ionizing radiation because it can't ionize. What does ionize mean? I'm going to make up a hypothetical two atoms that have an electron, proton, and neutron. This one has an extra electron, which means it has another proton to balance it out. This one doesn't. And relatively speaking, this one's more, we'll say it's more positively charged just for the hell of it, because, no, more negatively charged, because it has an empty space where another electron could fit. This one has two electrons in its orbit, so it's stable. If they share, they both become capable of connecting. Ionizing radiation can cause them to join or cause them to separate, because it shakes the outer shell of electrons and makes them let go. It doesn't break atoms, it breaks bonds that are chemical, changing a compound into independent atoms or vice versa. Those have the effect of causing cancer because that can happen in DNA. If the signal is a short enough frequency, it may be exactly the right wavelength to do this to one molecule or another by making it move. That's how microwave ovens effectively work, because they take the hydrogen and two oxygen atoms, which effectively make a negative and positive effectively, and basically shake the atom. That's it. Now that's hypothesis and theory and stuff, but let's get to the point. It's called ionizing radiation because it can cause the outer shell of atoms to become ionized, meaning they're either more positive or more negatively charged than normal, which can cause bonding between molecules or individual atoms, or break the bonds. That's the definition of when things get bad. And it happens to correspond very, very closely to heating effect. Thermal heating effects are a great way to detect this, because if it can induce heating in a piece of bacon, it can probably damage cells in it. I mean, that's the first go, no-go test. If it doesn't produce a certain effect, then you look for others, but there are several tests. And it's based on, is it powerful enough, in spite of the low frequency it's at 2 gigahertz or whatever, to cause damage? Now, that's a very, very thumbnail sketch of the subject. I'm going on and on, it sounds like, but to come to a conclusion, and I'll put it in the title, no, the hazards from 2.4 gigahertz cell phone exposure are not really, truly, easily connected with any kind of illness. Caveats. If your nervous system has become damaged by having something in there that isn't supposed to be, it can react. We all know about radio mouth and all that kind of stuff, but the fact is that this is technically possible, but you have to consistently demonstrate that it works. I have done positive and negative testing. Yes, you can disprove somebody's assertion by showing that there's no proof for it. Lack of evidence is sometimes evidence of nothing really going on. And most of the people who claim to be electromagnetically sensitive, and I've said it before in other videos, or have been harmed by it, are grossly insensitive to it. People who don't care one way or another, who have no emotional connection to it, can sometimes detect radio signal pulses. They can sense it somehow. They don't know why. It's kind of, it's really hit or miss. And I swear sometimes it's based on whether or not they had tea or coffee that day. But the point is that this is not a consistently bad thing to happen to people. And if a person wants to shield against this, it is trivial. You look up insect screen or bug screen. Bug. You use the same screening you use to keep listening devices from working in your home. That's it. Anyone claiming that they've had health issues from it that hasn't gone out of their way to test whether or not it really is causing it, they just want something to blame. That's my opinion. That doesn't mean anything. I don't know who you're talking about. But as for this frequency range, it is grossly too low of a frequency to do this. In spite of one person who came on my channel for months at a time claiming that these frequencies were the resonant frequency for the head when they were wrong by a full octave. So anyway, to reconclude, no, cell phone exposure, if it's at that frequency or anything around that, isn't going to do this. You might want to look up the actual frequencies that have been found to cause some sort of detection in people consistently, and some sort of effects on biological beings. Yes, there have been experiments, and some of them are woo-peddling things, trying to sell you, magic devices to make pot grow better. But there have been some experiments that show that electromagnetic radiation, and it isn't radiation, nuclear radiation, just radio signals, that radio signals can have an effect on plants and bugs because they happen to be sensitive to it. Magnetic fields that are static, such as literally DC electricity, can also do this. You may have more trouble from DC than AC. It may not be the frequency or the intensity. You might be just sensitive to just having electricity around. Electrostatic charges being very, very easily detected by human beings. And voltage potentials or gradients. A DC charge from here to there. Or just a voltage difference, even if it's a low frequency like 60 cycles a second. Test for these and work with them. Get rid of them if you wish to. That's my advice to everybody who's ever been asked by this. And I'm sorry, but the ones who are schizophrenics don't listen to me, and the ones who aren't schizophrenics realize, no, I'm imagining something, or it might be some other medical problem. I'm going to drop this and actually go off and try to find out what it is. And half the time they find out that they actually have a neurological disorder. Or just simply that they just need to change their diet to increase potassium. That was the silliest one. No, the person was eating normal potassium. Their body required more because there was something wrong with them. They didn't process potassium correctly. That was all with them. So unless somebody is willing to drop an obsession with blaming radio companies, they can't be helped. The idea is, if it's not the answer, drop it and go find the answer. I have several relatives who've gone through similar things. With some of them, it was literally just something's wrong with them genetically about processing a certain protein or vitamin. That was the diagnosis, and it was hard to find. But going off on sub-frequencies and radios, and that didn't help anything. They wasted years of their lives to find out later on that literally they just needed to change their diet or take a supplement, ironically. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. I hope this was useful to anybody watching, and I'll try to put a title in that gets your attention if you're trying to find an answer to this. If it's not the radio signals, you need to move on to other solutions. Bye.